Welcome to TV Free Baltimore's Books and Authors.
Today we are very fortunate to have as our guest a return guest, Robert Ehrlich, former governor of Maryland, and he's here to talk about his latest book, his fifth book, which I have this correct, it's Original, Unconventional, and Inconvenient, a month-to-month analysis of Trump, his administration, and the MAGA movement.
It's good to be back. It's good to be back on the West Side. It's good to be back in Lansdowne. I always look for any excuse to come back home, as you know.
Right.
This really is my home.
Oh, terrific. Now, the thing to start with, there's been a lot of books about Donald Trump in the last few years. Why this book? What compelled you to write that book? Why?
Most of the books with regard to the president have been either sycophantic, Trump is great, Trump was terrific, Trump was perfect, or Trump is the worst thing since sliced bread, from Trump's evil the whole night from the left. Obviously, I am a conservative Republican, right of center, supported the president. My wife worked for him in the Department of Justice. Got to know him many years ago when he brought Miss USA to Maryland. We negotiated 2 years, in fact, in Baltimore. But I wanted to write something that was not just that, not just perfect, not just evil, from a right of center perspective, that detailed the successes, the failures, the MO, the importance of his role in American history, how truly unique his presidency was, how truly unique his approach to the job was, and most important, this is really the end of the book, that path, that agenda, that document, if you will, those planks, which to me represent the future of our party. I'm a Jack Kemp Republican. Jack Kemp was my hero growing up. Ronald Reagan, obviously. Ronald Reagan, Jack Kemp attempted to varying degrees of success to make this a blue-collar party. Donald Trump did it in 4 years with that agenda for the future. He made people with dirt under their fingernails, people with blue collars, people that grew up in Lansdowne and Arbutus and Catonsville, for that matter, in urban America, feel that there was a path forward, that America still is exceptional, that the American dream still is viable. And to me, that was his greatest political success. So the last point of the book is, I don't know if the president's going to run. We were talking off camera whether he's going to run or not, who knows. Governor DeSantis, obviously, Secretary Pompeo, many others have aspirations, all very strong candidates. But the bottom line is, with respect to whomever it is, that agenda, that platform has to be the Republican platform going forward. It's not just the Republican platform, in my view. It's the best platform for the country going forward.
Oh, okay. And so speaking of that with the book, to say what are basically the main themes, and let's talk about maybe them one-on-one. We want to get a little detail about your different points in that book.
Everybody talks about disruptor, and they talk about the fact that establishments hate disruptors and hate disruption. What do establishments appreciate most of all? Status quos.
Yes.
That's why they're establishments. And that's why the Democrat establishment, in a philosophical sense, and the Republican establishment as well, did not like Donald Trump. He challenged those assumptions that had really governed in Washington, D.C., have prevailed in Washington, D.C. forever. I talk about expected hypocrisies in the book. Politicians, presidents especially, are expected to follow hypocrisies to be safe. Example, George Stephanopoulos, after years of Russia investigation, asked the president, nationally televised interview, well, if a foreign power contacted you, with dirt on a political opponent, what would you do? Well, the expected hypocrisy here is, I'd call the FBI. What does Donald Trump say? I listened to the guy. Classic Trump, right? Taking assumptions of the foreign policy establishment to task. You got to have a two-state solution, a three-state solution. You have to placate the Palestinians. You have to keep the American embassy in Tel Aviv. No, we're going to reject those assumptions. We're going to reject that status quo. We're going to engage in bilateral peace deals with Sunni states. We're going to reject that entire foundation, the entire predicate, if you will, with regard to American foreign policy that's prevailed over the past 3, 4, 5 decades. Same with trade deals. Now, we're going to negotiate bilateral trade deals. And we're going to report to the American people. We're not going to be the classic politician and tell everybody how great we are. We're going to tell everybody how great we are. The president was pretty good at that. But we're also going to keep score. We're going to tell you, remind you, if you will, what we said in the campaign, and we're going to keep score and constantly remind you that we actually achieved that goal, or if we didn't achieve it, why? And the fact is that we tried. We're going to try to keep our word to the American public. In my view, that approach, that very anti-establishment approach, that very unique approach, that American populist approach, if you will, was his secret ingredient with respect to his appeal to, again, people making $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a year. And the proof is in the pudding. African American vote, Asian vote, and especially Hispanic vote increased dramatically from 2016 to 2020. That, in my view, my humble opinion, that approach holds the secret ingredient for Republican success, again, going forward.
Oh, okay, very interesting. And these are the main points that you're making.
Well, I also, I could go to the anti-establishment motif, and I talk about this in the book plenty, as well, his press treatment. Now, President Reagan famously, quote unquote, went around the press, direct to the American people, those national addresses. He didn't have social media. This president tweets, this president disrespect to the legacy media. This president insults to the media. Not exactly in the political playbook. Not exactly Politics 101. We know what you are. We know what philosophical direction you're coming from. We know you don't like me. We know you're part of that establishment. We know. So we know, and you know, and now the American public knows where you're coming from. So we're not even going to go around you. We're going to combat you. We're going to confront you. We're going to challenge your assumptions. And as a result, the press went crazy. The establishments went crazy. Both party establishments. I make the point that to some extent, this is a cult of personality. Now, cults of personality are typically associated with dictators and dictatorships and all that. But this was a cult of personality with an agenda that grew within the Republican Party. People forget. In my last book book I discussed with you in this very place a couple years ago, the origins of that campaign, that initial appeal to blue-collar folks. But it doesn't take too much energy to recall that Donald Trump was a second, third-tier candidate coming out. He was a celebrity, but it was Cruz, it was Kasich, it was Bush, it was big Republican names. And this guy, from the bleachers, throwing spitballs at the establishment, started. And a lot of Republican volunteers, a lot of Republican grassroots types liked it. And a lot of crossover Democrats and independents, and those with blue collars, liked it. And they took him on as their guy. And in that sense, a very unique politician with very unique roots, a very unique appeal, but again, an agenda for the country's future. Now, I also make the point in the book, if you look at the Trump agenda, for the most part, it's typical Republican stuff. It's regulatory reform, it's school choice, it's tax cuts, it's cutting bureaucracy and all that stuff. But especially with his approach, his MO, on trade deals, with regard to the foreign policy stuff, with regard to the press, it was my way. This is different. This is American populism. It's not typically, Donald Trump was not a populist. He's a billionaire. He can't be a populist if you're a billionaire, right? But he had a very unique brand of American exceptionalism / populism that, again, appealed to that American middle class that, again, I think holds the secret for our party.
Oh, very good. Now, I mean, you say in that, you also, in the book, talk about the pluses and minuses. This is a month-by-month analysis.
Yeah.
So what would you say, you have in general, but what did he do great and what did he do not so great? What are the minuses?
Well, I talked a little bit about what he did, I thought, very well, which was this agenda.
Yes, but what about the
minuses? But let me first get to the form of the book.
Okay, the form. Tell us the form.
Because I didn't want to sit down and write history from the last 5, 4, 3 to last year,
Yeah.
when I had already written about it.
Yeah.
In my various columns for national publications. So I selected what I thought were the most insightful, most controversial, most accurate, if you will, pieces that depicted what had occurred at that time in 2017 or 2019 or whatever, and include those columns in the book. But when I do that per chapter, I also engage in original writing, setting the scene. This is where we were at that time. This was the Russia investigation. This was Robert Mueller. This is what the press was saying. These are my pieces, but then I conclude, if you will, with new original writing with respect to why that particular chapter was important, why that particular approach was important. So that's the book. And I find this, I've done this a couple other times with my previous books, that people can easily pick up, read a chapter, set it down, read another chapter. It makes it, in my view, more readable. But also, since I had captured the history at the time, why not do that?
Yeah.
With regard to failures, a couple, in my view. The first debate, I think a lot of Republicans, particularly a lot of Trump supporters, were frustrated by the president's repeated talking over President Biden at the time,
Yes.
Vice President Biden at the time. That performance hurt him. It hurt him with women. It hurt him with suburban women. It hurt him with suburban women who've been trending Democrat for years now, and you saw it in the polls.
Yes.
I thought Charlottesville was, I know what he meant, and I thought he could have easily used better language and corrected what he originally said. But I thought that was a missed opportunity and a missed high fastball, if you will. And really, with the third one, this was interesting because it's a net negative, but I understand it, and I think people, once you understand the president's personality and persona, you get it more. With respect to the early reaction to the pandemic, Trump the salesman was challenged by Trump the president. You know, the president's advantage as a politician was the optimism. The salesmanship, if you will. He's a salesman. He's a developer. He's a Queens developer. He's a businessman. He's a casino guy. He's really good at sales, and that's important. And particularly for a politician, because you're selling yourself, you're selling your ideas, your platform.
Right.
So that was a strength, but then he met the, wow, this is a pandemic, it's killing people, and his early appearances, I thought, were less than optimal because the salesmanship part of his personality trumped the president part of his personality, in the sense that he tried to minimize, and I understand what he was trying to do. We need life to go on. But he minimized, to some extent, what was going on and was criticized for it. So I thought that was a very interesting clash of two aspects of his personality. He knew he had to be president, but he was always the consummate salesman. And the consummate salesman got him very far in life and in politics.
Yeah.
So I talk about those events as well. I had finished the book prior to January 6th, but I did add a few pages on January 6th. I felt I didn't have all the information, and as we sit here today, we still don't have all the information about January 6th. So I'll leave that to future historians with regard to what went down, how it went down, why it went down.
Yes.
On January 6th. And his role. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Because I know the interesting with the pandemic has just come out recently, and I was looking at it today again in the news, and that he seemed to be in the presidency very much sort of not pushing, but sort of against vaccines and himself getting vaccines. And now here lately, he said he's just announced, I had a booster. I want everybody to get vaccinated.
Yeah, well, I think that, again, it's my point. It's my point. He wasn't against vaccines because he didn't get enough credit, in my view, for pushing the science, pushing the scientists to come up with the vaccine. But again, it was always guys, we have to get back to business. Gosh, this is killing our economy. Gosh, this is killing jobs. This is killing our country. This is killing families. This is killing kids in school. So I got that. And we got that. You know, he was always motivated by that. And I would have been too. Probably less so than more of a liberal Democrat used to government dictates. On the other hand, this was unique. We didn't know what we were dealing with. It was killing a lot of people. And again, part of the salesmanship, I think, maybe should have been ratcheted back. But he was never anti-vaccine. He's the guy that deserves the credit for the vaccine. So again, do discuss all this in the book. I wanted to write a book that was fair to him, not sycophantic, but fair, but most importantly, point out how different all this was. Someone who's been in politics for a long time, someone who's tried to build our party, to really expand the base of our party, and to have this guy come about in a very non-traditional way and do it, all the while being pretty rough around the edges, all the while being pretty hostile to the legacy press, all the while being pretty hostile to the Republican establishment, is amazing and different and unique and needed to be written about.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, do you feel that because of what he's done so far, his impact up to this point, that he's changed the direction of American politics?
Well, he had changed direction, but now we've changed back. The first thing President Biden did was undo a lot of, in our view, my view, successful Trump initiatives. No more compelling example than the border. People forget the first couple of years of Trump administration, there was not border peace. There was some chaos there. There were caravans. And then presidential leadership. Hey, stay in Mexico. We're going to negotiate it. We did it. And guess what happened? Border peace. And the numbers reflect all this. What does President Biden come do? First thing, we're going to undo it. Why? Well, Trump did it. And as a result, we've had chaos there for the first year of the Biden administration.
And explosion of people trying to get across the border.
And an explosion of sex trafficking, and an explosion of drugs, and who knows how many. Yesterday, the news, terrorists caught. So again, the borderlessness crowd, the sanctuary cities crowd, the woke crowd, the progressive crowd, the crowd that's now taken over the Democratic Party, they're in control. And in my view, the American public, America is paying the price for it.
It brings into another point I wrote down. This is about, do you feel, and has come across some people say the democratic process is broken right now?
Democratic process is broken other than the sense that I think some folks on the other side took advantage of mail-in voting.
These Republican-controlled legislatures, they said they're going to move it so that Republican Party will control congressional seats.
I don't know how
future.
As far as reapportionment, sure, Republicans do that, and Democrats do it. Republicans in Democratic states, and Republicans do it to Democrats. And in Maryland, Democrats do it to Republicans because the Democrats control the state and always have. So that's as old as the country itself. That's not going to change. It's pretend, by the way, that politicians are going to willingly give up power. Forget it. Now, amazingly, of all the states, California has what's closest to what's fair. They have that independent commission out there, which is California, a good idea. Out of California.
Wow. Okay.
But in Maryland, not so long ago, it was 4-4. I was in Congress with Connie Morello and Roscoe Bartlett and Wayne Gilchrist, and Democratic National Committee said, that's Maryland. It can't be 4-4. Boom, boom, boom. I lived in Timonium. They redrew a line from my house to Ocean City, and suddenly Wayne Gilchrist and I were in the same district. And by the way, Republicans do this to Democrats in Republican states. So it is what it is. It's politics. To pretend you're outraged is phony.
They talk about election reform laws, and they say they're supposed to be favoring Republicans because they're getting rid of things like, trying to get rid of things like early voting, mail-in voting.
Well, all of this, I do think that I'm a traditionalist to some extent. I think election day means something. So to have 30 days worth of voting, in my view, is, I get it. It's modern society. People are busy raising kids and all that. So early voting, fine. A week, fine. But you start getting in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, mail-in voting, you lose election day. And as a result, you have sometimes legitimate questions about the accuracy of the vote.
A lot of it, too, is it can change. I mean, the political scene, even if it's talking about the national office, the presidency, and especially the incumbents running, as in the case that Trump did, you've got all this time during those 30 days that people are watching, and somebody voted here who might vote differently here.
But let's just take a non-fraud situation. Let's just take a situation where we have 30 days and there's a debate late. And you're going to vote for candidate A, but candidate B really was impressive. You want to vote for candidate B, but you already voted.
That's right.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So again, enough. Transparency is the great answer here.
Okay.
Full, open transparency. Both parties get to watch the votes being counted. No shenanigans. Paper ballots as a backup. Enough. This is America, 2021, almost 2022. Enough of the questions. We should have open, full transparency with regard to our elections.
Well, that would be a great idea, I think. And of course, you addressed the gerrymandering. And that's your solution, I think, of how the democracy the process can be mended is both transparency.
Listen, this is interesting, and I'll just sort of maybe close on this to some extent.
Okay.
I've been in politics for a long time. I was elected to the legislature in my 20s. Mm-hmm. For my entire political career and way before me, both parties fought, and I'll use the football term, between the 20s. Mm-hmm. Both parties shared a common predicate: pluralism, free speech, America first, First Amendment, the whole 9 yards, freedom of the press. Liberal Democrats and conservative Republicans shared those views. In the last 5, 10, 15 years, with the advent of progressivism, things have changed. Mm-hmm. To the extent progressives control the Democratic Party, or at least the liberals are now kowtowed into silence. Progressives don't share a lot of those views. They don't share our views with regard to pluralism or civil liberties or the First Amendment or capitalism or American exceptionalism. Just listen to what they say. Watch them. Mm-hmm. Look at their platforms. Look at their legislation. So certainly the Republican Party has moved further right. Trump, to some extent, deserves credit for that, as does President Reagan and others. But Democrats haven't moved left. They've moved hard left. They've moved out of traditional liberalism. And the best example here is the president. The president was a mainstream liberal Delaware Democrat forever, for 4+ decades.
Right.
And now look at the agenda of his administration. It's woke, it's progressive, it's pretty extreme in many cases. Mm-hmm. And it's funny, we talk about, and this occurred obviously after I finished the book, but we talk about education, and we talked about what happened in Virginia a few weeks ago. Mm-hmm. Well, Terry McAuliffe, the old Clinton Democrat now running as a woke progressive, actually had the nerve to say what the woke left thinks. Mm-hmm. He said, paraphrasing, no, we will take care of the kids. You bow out. You just butt out parents. Mm-hmm. And that's the reason we won that race. Mm-hmm. We were about to lose that race. We barely won that race. It's a blue-leaning state. Mm-hmm. But enough blue-leaning parents in Fairfax County and Loudoun County said, we're pretty liberal, but that's my kid. Mm-hmm. I have standing here to show up. Mm-hmm. I have standing here to spout my views. I have standing here to criticize the board. I have standing here not to be investigated by the FBI because I showed up at a school board meeting. Mm-hmm. So that's true. So the Republicans took advantage, not by being conservative or to the right. It was just, hey, this is just common sense. Mm-hmm. It's your kid. You have a right to show up and give your opinions and vote and influence. This is public school. Your taxpayer money pays for these people.
Right.
So again, it's getting back to my analogy. Parties have fought between the 20s forever until now. Mm-hmm. So that's why I write the book. That's why I write all my books. That's why I care so much. And that's why so many people do care so much. Some of the fundamental values of the country are under attack. American exceptionalism is being impeached. The American dream is at risk. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying the Democratic Party is going socialist. Liberals have not, but they're quiet. Mm-hmm. But I am saying the Democratic Party now models itself after huge welfare state Western European governments. Mm-hmm. That's not our idea of freedom. Mm-hmm. And you see it most of all in the First Amendment. Mm-hmm. And you see it most of all in the First Amendment in the way it's limited on campus these days. Mm-hmm. So it's one of the reasons I'm so interested in education, one of the reasons I'm so interested in education on campus. Because a lot of these new concepts, a lot of this woke stuff started on campus. We made fun of it, we laughed, we marginalized it until it became a mainstream theme of a major political party in the United States of America. They're not playing between the 20s. They're challenging our basic assumptions and principles as Americans. So I think it's important. I think politicians like this guy were important, and others to step up and say, no, we don't want to go red zone. We want both parties to be between the 20s because America is exceptional. America is great. America is flawed. American history is flawed, but you can't reinvent history.
Yeah.
And so, again, the reason for the book, the reason we show up at political events, the reason we write checks, the reason we run as candidates, we care about the country, we care about the future, we care about our kids. But right now, a lot of that is under the gun. A lot of that is being challenged, and I think midterms in 2022 and the next presidential election, 24, will go an awful long way down that road as to what America is going to become. Whether we really are going to have fundamental problems going forward or not.
Well, to follow up on that, I was going to say, what is the path, do you think, for the Republican victory in 2024? Regardless of who runs.
Read the book.
I'll do it. Read the book today.
Read the book and understand the agenda. And understand why those Loudoun County parents voted Republican for the first time in a long time. And understand how dangerous woke is. And understand that a lot of these folks do not share views about the First Amendment and capitalism and pluralism.
Okay.
And take appropriate action. Do not vote for them.
And what do you think of Donald Trump's chances, or that he may run next time, or that if he ran, he would definitely get the nomination, but could he win in this environment?
I have not opined on that because we're not even at the midterms.
I know we're not even we're still 3 years out.
We saw a mini midterm, and by the way, New Jersey was probably more impressive than Virginia because Republicans had no money and it was 50-50. No money at all in a very dark blue state.
Yeah.
I don't know what the president's going to do, but I do know this, that as I discuss in the book, that agenda has to define the Republican Party going forward.
Okay, well, very good. So we want not only people to read this book, politicians should read this book.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because it's great to see you again.
Same here.
When I do my book signings, running around the East Coast now, and I'll be in probably 8 or 9 states next 90 days. I have candidates come up to me, obviously, and my advice is steal it. Steal this stuff.
Steal this
it's pretty
book.
good. By the way, it worked those 4 years. And don't believe the revisionists in the media. Look at the record. And so steal what you want here because it may be my book, but it's for everyone, and particularly for Republican candidates looking to win.
Good.
So I love that point.
Well, terrific. So again, thank you for stopping by again,
great
Governor.
to see you, my friend.
And we'd like to have you back as much as you'd like to come.
Thank you.
So,
great to see you. Godspeed. Merry Christmas.
And same to you and your family.
Thank you.
And ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for tuning in. This was another great show and with Governor Ehrlich, and he has some wisdom for us. So I'd say get that book. It just came out. I'm sure it's on Amazon and every place else you can find it. And until next time, this is Paul Stefan saying see you later.
You're watching Books and Authors on TV Free Baltimore.